What if those nasty cabinets sitting in your kitchen right now were the very solution to your kitchen's problem? Most people think that their cabinets are too far gone and they're too dated and they're far beyond any help, and that they would be better off buying new ones instead. But what if I were to tell you that I've worked on some pretty far gone cabinets and have turned them into high dollar products for clients of mine? In this video, I'm going to show you step by step on how to create premium cabinets for yourself. Let's jump into it. So a question starting out, if you're assessing your kitchen, is, are my cabinets still usable? Most of the time they are, because older cabinets are typically going to be built with solid wood, unlike today's cabinets is mostly built with particle board. Particle board, once it gets wet, will start swelling up and it'll just be ruined. Wood takes a better impact over time. So if your cabinet's not rotten, or if it doesn't have like black mold all over it, then you're probably pretty good. If I'm doing a job for a kitchen cabinet, then I will basically do a thorough cleaning. I'll get everything out. I'll peel up any wallpaper or and just clean it out with a shop vac, spray everything down with an all-purpose cleaner, and I will just thoroughly clean it as much as I can, because you want a good surface to work off of, especially when you're about to start painting. So a lot of people think, oh, do I have to sand my cabinets before I start painting, like to get, if my cabinets have like a lacquer on it or a polyurethane, like doesn't that mean I have to sand it off? Actually, no. And which is really good, because I've done it before where I have to sand the entire cabinet and then I'll start painting. But thankfully they've made a product, it's called a bonding primer, and you want to make sure you get good quality paint for all of this. So I like using Behr's bonding primer. You could get this at Home Depot, and it'll usually come in a 1 gallon pail. And I will either use that or another brand called Stix, Stix. That's another really good one. What you need to think about before you start painting is, okay, how am I going to paint this? I like using a sprayer, an airless sprayer, if I can. We had a commercial sprayer, and you want to make sure you have a high dollar tip on it if you can. So you can possibly rent this at Home Depot or borrow it from a friend if you know that they have one. You want to make sure that you have a good quality tip on it. Is one of the most important things, because your tip is gonna determine how fine the paint particles are gonna come out. So you really want a smooth finish, and that's one of the reasons why I like a sprayer, is because you get that fine finish, kind of like you would if you were painting a car. So another thing that you can do, instead of using a sprayer, is you can use a foam roller. This would typically be on a cigar roller, and you want to make sure you get the foam one, because it doesn't have texture in it, kind of like if you did with the one where it has bristles on it. You can sand in between coats, just do like a light sand with like 220 or even higher, just to knock off any high spots, because when you get that foam roller, it's going to create little hips and valleys in there, and you'll see like some sort of texture on it. So you really kind of want to stay away from that as much as possible, but you are able to scuff sand it to get a better finish. So what I would do is I would go ahead and take off all your cabinet hardware, take all the doors off, and then start doing your primer, your bonding primer. This is going to be, you're going to want to do like a thin coat, especially if you're doing a sprayer, because you're going to want to mask everything off using a plastic drop cloth and blue masking tape. You're going to want to do this over your walls and your windows. Maybe not your walls if you're doing like a whole house renovation. You're already planning on painting the walls. Also, your flooring, just in case, if it's bare subfloor, then I typically don't worry about it. But if it's like tile or anything like that, I'll put a drop cloth over it. And you just want to make sure that there's no gaps, because overspray is a thing. I don't care if it's across the room. I'll make sure it's masked off and that I have a barrier so that way overspray doesn't leach out to anything. So your primer is something cool about your primer is that when you spray it or you roll it on, you want to make sure that you kind of do a thin coat. This is just something so that your enamel paint that you're going to put on next has something to bind to. However much primer you put on there can show through on your finished coat. So like say if you had streaks or run is what I mean. If you have streaks or runs through your paint, then it's going to show on the final coat. So you kind of want to do a thin coat of primer if you can. I'll let that dry, and then I'll switch over to my kitchen cabinet enamel. I like using Benjamin & Moore is what we used for our project, and also Bear's another good one. But you want to make sure that you have a good quality cabinet enamel paint, and always get a little bit more than what you think you'll need, and I'll go into that later. But having a good quality paint really makes a difference opposed to buying cheap Walmart paint or whatever, because it's durable, it holds up over time, and it looks great. If I'm spraying, then I'll typically treat it like I'm painting a car. My boss, he used to paint cars for a living, so he taught me how to do all this. And basically what you're doing is you want to make sure that you don't apply too much. So I like to stay about 8 inches away from where I'm spraying, and I'll overlap my passes. So that way, not only am I spraying new area, but also I'm feathering in where I just was, so that way it comes out even. One of the biggest things, if I had to give a tip to somebody who was using an airless sprayer, is don't overpaint, because it's easy to do. Always do thin coats, and you can always come back later and paint. Especially if you've never done it before, give yourself some grace and just do thin coats, especially on your finish, because this is what you're gonna see, and you can always do touch up later. So let me tell you a story. When we were working on one of the houses, renovating, I was in charge of painting the cabinets, and we apparently didn't clean all the stuff out of the cabinets thoroughly enough, and there was a bottle of blue food coloring inside of there, and somehow it got busted open. And there was, after I had done the bonding primer, I just started seeing blue food coloring bleed through the wood. So what I use for my stain blocker is I'll use Kilts. Kilts paint's really good. And there's a few other stain blockers out there on the market, but I've always just used Kilts. It's worked for me. I had to do a couple passes with it, just by roller or whatever, paintbrush. And that's typically how I'll deal with my stains. And sometimes you'll have grease stains or whatever, depending on how rough the cabinets were and how well you cleaned them up. But Kilts is a good one to use if you ever have stain problems, typically for when painting, I'll say for example, our kitchen cabinets was about 40 foot long of cabinets, just roughly. This is the top sections, the bottom section. So it's about 40 feet. I used 1 pass of primer, and I think that was about 2 gallons worth. And then I want to say for your finish coat that I might have used 4, because you want to do 2 coats for your finish, especially on your doors. Because what I'll typically do for my doors, all my door cabinet doors and shelves, I'll get workhorses and I'll lay some 2x4s out on it. And typically, if I'm knee deep in a renovation, I don't really have to mask off much, but the only thing is the windows. And this is before we do any painting on the walls, and it's just bare subfloor, so it really doesn't matter. And I'll just spray everything inside, or I do it sometimes outside if I need to. And I'll do my passes that way. Sometimes your doors are going to take longer than the cabinets themselves because you got to flip them over. I like to wait 16 to 24 hours for everything to dry, because if you start laying cabinet doors on top of each other and it's still just the slightest bit moist, then it's going to dry that way, and then whenever you come to take them apart, you're going to rip off some of the paint and it's just not going to look good. And then you'll have to come back over it, paint it, and then you got to feather it in and all of that. But that's just something that you need to be aware of. If you're doing this all by roller, then that's one of the perks about doing it with a roller versus air sprayers, because you don't have to mask off everything. But the roller, you have to kind of get in the nooks and crannies, and that can be a little bit difficult. So you might need to rely on a little bit of a paintbrush and do it that way, especially for like cabinets like ours, where it has like the different indentations in it. But that's pretty much it as far as the painting process goes. And then I'll just take all the masking off after everything's good and dried, and I'll use I usually get hardware from Amazon. You can get it in bulk. It's a lot cheaper than going to Lowe's. I know that. And you can definitely you can get some pretty cool looking hardware on there. And that's pretty much it. That's everything I have to say about painting your kitchen cabinets. You can really make a kitchen pop by doing this. It's one of my favorite things to do. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. And until then, I'll see y'all next time.